Michael Jordan sees young fan drawing his shoes. What he does next shocks the school. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Elijah sat quietly in the corner of his small, modest room, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. His fingers moved steadily, sketching the outline of a pair of sneakers, iconic in every way. The unmistakable design of the Air Jordan 1s took shape, each line drawn with the precision of someone who had studied every detail. The familiar red, black, and white color scheme emerged on the paper, but these weren't just any sneakers. These were the ones Elijah dreamed of wearing, if only he could afford them. Elijah's family wasn't rich. In fact, they were struggling to make ends meet. His mother worked long hours as a janitor at a local hospital, and his father had passed away when he was young. Despite their efforts, there was little extra money for luxuries like expensive shoes. But Elijah's love for basketball had never wavered, even as his peers flaunted their Jordans and Nike gear. He couldn't afford to buy them, but he could still draw them. Every day after school, Elijah would take a pair of old, worn-out shoes and draw Jordans on them with a marker. He didn't care that they weren't real. To him, they were a symbol of something greater. At school, Elijah was often teased for his hand-me-down clothes, and the kids would make fun of his drawn-on shoes. "Nice knockoffs, Elijah," one of the boys would say, pointing at his feet. Elijah would just smile, trying to ignore the laughter. He knew they didn't understand. The shoes weren't just shoes, they were a dream. They were a connection to something bigger, something that made him feel like he could be a part of something extraordinary, even if the rest of the world couldn't see it. Elijah's connection to Michael Jordan wasn't just about basketball. Sure, he admired Michael for his skill, his legendary dunks, and his clutch performances in the NBA. But to Elijah, Jordan was more than just a player. He was the embodiment of overcoming odds. Michael Jordan had been cut from his high school team, and yet, he went on to become the greatest player of all time. That story had always inspired Elijah. If Jordan could rise from rejection and adversity, maybe Elijah could do the same in his own life. One afternoon, as Elijah sat drawing yet another pair of Jordans, his teacher, Mrs. Thompson, walked by. She had always been kind to him, but today, she paused and looked at his shoes, noticing the detailed sketch of the famous sneaker. "Elijah, those are really good," she said, kneeling beside him. Elijah blushed, a bit embarrassed by her attention. "Thanks," he muttered, shifting in his seat. "Tell you what," Mrs. Thompson said with a warm smile, "I've got a few ideas for our school's upcoming talent show. Maybe you could do something with these? You've got real talent." Elijah blinked, unsure of how to respond. He had never thought of his drawings as something worth showing off. They were just a way to escape, to feel like he could be part of something bigger, but now his teacher was telling him that his passion might be something others could appreciate. As days passed, Elijah found himself thinking more and more about Mrs. Thompson's suggestion. Could he really share his drawings with others? He spent the next few days perfecting his sketches, adding details he hadn't thought about before. He thought about how amazing it would be to one day wear the real Jordans, but he also realized that it wasn't just about the shoes. It was about the feeling they gave him, the sense of belonging, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could make it too, just like his idol. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan was still going about his life. His career had taken him to new heights, but his connection to the kids who looked up to him was something he hadn't always fully understood. Jordan knew his brand was huge. His shoes were a symbol of success, of greatness, and to many, they represented something beyond just a basketball player. But as Michael got older, he started to realize that his influence had grown into something more than he had ever intended. He had spent years focused on perfecting his craft, on winning championships, and on proving that he was the greatest of all time. But as he reflected on his legacy, he began to feel a sense of responsibility to the kids who wore his shoes, the ones who saw him as more than just a basketball player. He saw in them a desire to achieve something great, to make a name for themselves, just as he had. In recent years, he had quietly given back to communities, supporting underprivileged kids who dreamed of playing basketball but didn't have the resources to pursue it. But he had always kept it low-key. It wasn't about seeking recognition. It was about doing the right thing, giving others the opportunity to achieve their dreams. One day, as Michael was going through some fan letters and social media messages, one caught his eye. It was from a school in Philadelphia, describing a young boy named Elijah who had been drawing Jordans on his shoes. Michael had always been moved by stories like these, but this one struck a deeper chord. It wasn't just about a kid drawing shoes, it was about a child's hope, the belief that even in the face of poverty, dreams could still take shape. The letter described how Elijah had faced ridicule for his shoes but never gave up on his passion. It painted a picture of a young boy who, despite having very little, still held on to the belief that he could make something of himself. Michael's heart stirred as he read the words. He couldn't help but think back to his own struggles growing up, how, despite being overlooked, he had kept pushing forward. And now, here was a kid, on the other side of the country, doing the same thing. Michael decided that he needed to meet Elijah, to show him that dreams, no matter how big, could come true. He didn't know how or when he would do it, but he knew he had to give back in some way, just like those kids had given him the drive to succeed. Back in Philadelphia, Elijah's life continued, full of schoolwork, basketball practice, and more drawings. But nothing could have prepared him for what would happen next. One morning, as Elijah was finishing his drawing of a new pair of Jordans, his teacher, Mrs. Thompson, approached him with a piece of paper in her hand. "Elijah," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I have something amazing to tell you." She handed him the letter that Michael Jordan had written. Elijah's eyes widened, and his hands shook as he read the words. Michael Jordan had heard about his drawings, and not only that, he wanted to meet him. Elijah couldn't believe it. It was a moment that felt surreal, like a dream come true. He looked up at Mrs. Thompson, who was smiling, clearly as amazed as he was. I don't know what to say," Elijah stammered. Mrs. Thompson just smiled and said, "Say thank you, Elijah. Because this is your moment." Elijah's life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. The news that Michael Jordan had taken notice of Elijah was still sinking in. It felt too surreal to be true. Elijah had been following Jordan's career for as long as he could remember, watching highlight reels of the NBA legend's greatest moments, mimicking his moves on the basketball court, and dreaming of one day owning a pair of the iconic Air Jordans. But now, it seemed like those dreams might be closer to reality than he ever thought possible. The days following the letter felt like a blur. The morning after he received it, Elijah could hardly sit still at school. Every time he glanced around the classroom, he couldn't help but think about the possibility of meeting Michael Jordan. He had always been an introverted kid, the one who kept to himself and drew his Jordans in silence, hoping one day someone might notice. But now, someone important had. The words "Michael Jordan wants to meet you" reverberated in his mind, almost like a mantra. Elijah's classmates began to treat him differently. The teasing that had once been a regular part of his school days started to fade, replaced by awe. His peers were finally acknowledging what he had known all along: his talent was real. They didn't completely understand his connection to basketball, but they understood that he was about to meet the man they had only seen on TV. It was a strange feeling. Elijah had always been an outcast, but now he was the center of attention. The same kids who used to laugh at his drawn-on shoes were now asking him about his meeting with Michael Jordan, offering congratulations, and even telling him they were rooting for him. But none of that mattered. The only thing Elijah could think about was the moment that was about to happen, the chance to meet the person who had inspired him to keep going, to never give up on his dreams. He didn't need the applause or the validation of his classmates. All he needed was this one moment with Michael. A few days later, after what felt like an eternity of anticipation, Elijah stood outside his school. A black car pulled up, and from it stepped someone who would forever change the course of his life. Michael Jordan, the man Elijah had looked up to for as long as he could remember, was there in the flesh. He walked toward Elijah, his unmistakable presence drawing the attention of every student who had gathered outside. But Elijah, standing at the front of the crowd, could only focus on one thing: the person walking toward him. "Elijah," Michael said with a smile, extending his hand. "It's great to finally meet you." Elijah's heart skipped a beat as he shook Michael's hand. The handshake was firm, warm, and sincere. This wasn't a press event, a staged appearance, or a scripted interview. This was just Michael Jordan, the man who had shaped an era of basketball, standing in front of him like a regular person. For a moment, Elijah was speechless. He had dreamed of this day, imagined it over and over, but now that it was happening, words seemed to escape him. "You've got a lot of people cheering for you, Elijah," Michael continued, breaking the silence. "I've seen your drawings, and I have to say, you've got a real gift. Not just for art, but for believing in yourself. And that's something that can take you far." Elijah looked up at Michael, his eyes wide. He had never heard those words spoken with such genuine encouragement. He had always believed in himself, but hearing it from the person he admired most meant the world. Michael wasn't just a figure in the distance anymore. He was a mentor, a supporter, and someone who truly saw Elijah's potential. "I never thought anyone would notice," Elijah finally managed to say, his voice shaky but full of gratitude. "I've always wanted to wear the real Jordans, but I never thought I'd be here, meeting you." Michael chuckled. "It's not just about the shoes, Elijah. It's about the journey, the hard work, and the belief that anything is possible. You've already shown that. You're living proof that it's not where you start, it's where you finish." Elijah smiled, his nerves slowly giving way to a sense of pride he had never felt before. Michael's words hit him harder than any highlight reel ever could. The shoes were just a symbol of the hard work, dedication, and belief in oneself that were required to achieve greatness. And now, with Michael Jordan standing in front of him, Elijah felt like he was already on the right path. As the crowd of students began to gather around them, Michael Jordan turned to Elijah with a wink. "I didn't come here empty-handed. I've got something for you." Elijah's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe it. Michael Jordan, his hero, was giving him something. Michael reached into the bag he was carrying and pulled out a pair of pristine, brand-new Air Jordans. Not the ones Elijah had drawn, but the real deal. The unmistakable red, black, and white design that had become synonymous with excellence. Elijah's hands trembled as Michael handed him the shoes. "Take good care of them," Michael said with a grin. "But remember, these shoes don't make you who you are. It's what you do with them that counts." Elijah could hardly believe what was happening. He stared at the shoes in his hands, the very shoes he had always dreamed of owning, and realized that this moment wasn't just about receiving something material. It was about the belief that someone who had made it to the top still saw value in the journey of a kid from Philadelphia. Michael Jordan wasn't just handing him shoes, he was handing him a future, a chance to dream bigger, to push harder, and to believe in himself in ways he never had before. As the moment settled in, Elijah looked up at Michael, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. You've changed my life." Michael's smile widened. "You've got it in you, Elijah. Keep working hard, keep dreaming big, and remember that anything is possible if you don't give up." With those final words, Michael turned and walked back to his car, but not before giving Elijah a final nod. Elijah stood there, clutching the shoes in his hands, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. He had always believed that anything was possible, but now, with the shoes in his hands and the encouragement from his hero in his heart, Elijah knew that his dreams were no longer just that, dreams. They were now a reality within his grasp. As the crowd began to disperse and the school day continued, Elijah walked back into the building, his head held higher than it ever had been before. The Jordans weren't just shoes, they were a reminder of everything he could accomplish, of the future he was going to build, and the person he was going to become. And as he walked through the hallways, he couldn't help but feel that he wasn't just carrying a pair of sneakers. He was carrying the weight of a dream that had been realized, one step at a time. The following days at school felt like a dream for Elijah. Walking into the classroom wearing his new pair of Air Jordans, the very ones Michael Jordan had personally given him, was nothing short of surreal. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was real, the feeling was different. The attention he received from his classmates was overwhelming, but it wasn't the kind of attention he had ever gotten before. This time, there was admiration and respect. The same kids who had once mocked him for his hand-drawn shoes now looked at him with awe. Elijah could feel their eyes on him as he walked into the classroom, but instead of feeling embarrassed or out of place, he felt proud. Proud not just of the shoes, but of the journey he had taken to get here. As the day went on, Elijah found himself being approached by more and more students, each wanting to talk to him about the shoes, about Michael Jordan, about his artwork, and about his story. But it wasn't the shoes that mattered to him, it was the fact that his story had been recognized, that someone had seen his potential and had decided to invest in him. Michael's gesture had given him confidence, and that confidence began to seep into every part of his life. At lunch, Elijah sat with his best friend, Marcus. Marcus had been with him through everything, through the teasing, through the difficult days when Elijah had come home feeling like he didn't belong. But now, things were different. Marcus couldn't help but stare at the shoes, a huge smile plastered across his face. "You know, Elijah," Marcus said, his voice filled with excitement, "this is crazy. I mean, Michael Jordan himself came to your school. You're walking around in his shoes now. How does that feel?" Elijah shrugged, though a smile tugged at his lips. "It feels unreal, honestly. But it's more than just the shoes. It's about everything that happened to get me here. You know, I never thought something like this could happen to someone like me." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly not understanding what Elijah meant. "What do you mean? You're the one who always believed. I've seen you drawing Jordans on your shoes for years. This was always in you, Elijah." Elijah paused, looking down at the Jordans on his feet, feeling a sense of gratitude. "Maybe. But I didn't think it was enough. I mean, what are the chances a kid like me gets to meet Michael Jordan, let alone get something from him? I've always dreamed of this moment, but now that it's real, I guess it's more about the belief that things can happen when you keep going. I just didn't expect anyone to see me, you know?" Marcus nodded, understanding more than Elijah had expected. "I get it. It's like that moment when you realize all that hard work, all that belief, actually gets you somewhere." The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Elijah found himself constantly thinking about the meeting with Michael, about the way he had encouraged him. The words had stuck with him, "It's not about the shoes, it's about what you do with them." Elijah realized that Michael wasn't just talking about basketball. He was talking about life. It wasn't the material things that defined you, it was your actions, your perseverance, and your heart. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Elijah couldn't wait to get home. He couldn't wait to talk to his mom and share everything that had happened. He had always been close to her, and in the quiet moments at home, she had been his biggest cheerleader. She had worked tirelessly to support him, and now, with this moment of recognition, Elijah felt like he had something to give back to her. When he got home, Elijah rushed inside, his heart pounding with excitement. His mom was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, and when she saw him walk in with the Jordans on his feet, her eyes widened. "Baby, is that really the pair?" she asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. Elijah nodded, grinning from ear to ear. "Yeah, Mom. Michael Jordan gave them to me." His mom froze for a moment, as though the words hadn't quite sunk in. "Michael Jordan? The Michael Jordan? From the NBA?" Elijah laughed, nodding again. "Yeah, Mom. The one and only. He came to my school. He saw my drawings, and he gave me these shoes." Tears welled up in his mom's eyes, and she pulled him into a tight hug. "I am so proud of you, Elijah. I know things have been tough, but you've always kept going. This is just the beginning." Elijah held her for a moment, feeling the weight of everything he had been working for. It wasn't just the shoes, it was the validation of his hard work, of his persistence, and of his belief in something bigger. And now, for the first time in a long while, Elijah felt like he was truly seen. Later that night, after dinner, Elijah sat in his room, sketching again. The pencils in his hand seemed to move with a new energy, a new drive. He began to design his own pair of shoes, combining his creativity with his admiration for Michael Jordan. The drawings became more detailed, more intricate, and for the first time, Elijah truly believed that he had the ability to create something that could inspire others, just as Michael had inspired him. The next morning, Elijah wore the Jordans to school again, but this time, they felt different. He wasn't just wearing them to fit in or to be admired. He wore them because they were a symbol of everything he had achieved, everything he was capable of. As he walked into school, there was a new energy in the air. He was no longer the quiet kid in the back of the class. He was the kid who had met Michael Jordan, the one whose drawings had been noticed by the greatest basketball player of all time. And while the shoes were still a point of conversation, it was Elijah's newfound confidence that truly stood out. Throughout the day, the students who had once mocked him began to approach him differently. They weren't asking about the shoes anymore, they were asking about his art, his passion, his journey. Even the teachers took notice, seeing Elijah in a new light. Mrs. Thompson, the teacher who had first encouraged him to share his drawings, gave him a nod of approval as he walked by her desk. "Elijah," she said with a smile, "I knew there was something special about you. Keep going. The world needs to see your talent." For Elijah, those words were more powerful than any recognition he had ever received. The shoes were no longer the focal point. It was the belief in himself, the understanding that he had something valuable to offer, that made all the difference. Michael Jordan had opened a door for him, but it was Elijah who had to walk through it. That night, as he lay in bed, Elijah couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. The boy who once felt invisible, whose dreams seemed too big for his circumstances, was now on a path that felt full of possibility. He was no longer drawing Jordans on old shoes. He was drawing his future, one step at a time. And just like Michael had told him, it wasn't about the shoes. It was about what he did with them. And for the first time, Elijah knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to create, to inspire, and to give back to others the way Michael had given to him. The journey was just beginning, but Elijah was ready. The following days at school felt like they belonged to someone else. Elijah could hardly believe that the events of the past week had happened to him. He walked into the classroom each day with the Air Jordans on his feet, the same pair Michael Jordan had handed to him in person, and the reality of it still hadn't fully settled in. His classmates continued to stare in awe, but this time, it wasn't just about the shoes. It was about everything that had followed, the story, the moment with Michael, the encouragement, and the promise of something bigger. But Elijah was beginning to realize that the shoes weren't what would define him. It was everything else, the lessons, the actions, and the journey. They were a symbol, sure, but they were also just the beginning. With each passing day, Elijah felt more determined than ever to turn his passion for basketball and his drawings into something more. He had always loved basketball, but now, it felt like his art had the power to take him places he had never dreamed of before. At lunch one day, Elijah sat with Marcus, who couldn't stop grinning. "You still can't believe this, huh?" Marcus asked as he picked at his lunch. Elijah shook his head, a smile on his face. "I don't know if I'll ever believe it, Marcus. It feels like a dream. Michael Jordan? Coming to my school? And the shoes. It's just too much. You deserve it, man. You've been drawing those shoes for years. You've always had this thing about you. Even when nobody noticed, you kept doing it. That's why you got those shoes." "You didn't quit," Marcus said, his words hitting Elijah with more weight than he expected. Elijah looked down at his Jordans, then up at his best friend. "I think I'm finally starting to understand that. It wasn't about getting the shoes, it was about doing what I loved." Michael just saw that. He saw the belief, the drive I had, even when no one else did. Marcus nodded, a serious expression on his face. "Yeah, and that's why you're gonna keep going. You can't just stop here. This is just the start." Elijah's mind began to race. Marcus was right. This was just the beginning. The shoes had given him confidence, but it wasn't the end of his journey, it was the spark. He had been given a rare opportunity, and he wasn't going to waste it. He wasn't just going to wear Jordans and hope for something more. He was going to make something of it. That afternoon, after school, Elijah went to the gym, where the basketball team was practicing. He was a part of the junior league team, but he hadn't played much this season. The coaches had always said his skills weren't developed enough. But now, standing outside the gym and watching the older kids run drills, something stirred in him. He wasn't just going to watch anymore. He was going to get better. He walked in, his Jordans gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The coach, Mr. Harlan, noticed him as he walked in, pausing for a moment as the other players dribbled around him. "Elijah, right?" Mr. Harlan called out, waving him over. Elijah walked toward him, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always been intimidated by the varsity players, but now, with a new sense of purpose, he approached without hesitation. "I've been hearing a lot about you," Coach Harlan said. "Those shoes, got them from someone special, huh?" Elijah smiled shyly. "Yeah. Michael Jordan gave them to me." "Nice. That's a big deal," Coach Harlan said with a grin. "So what are you doing here today? Looking to get in on some drills?" Elijah hesitated for a moment. I want to get better. I want to play more." Coach Harlan raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "I like your confidence. Let's see what you've got." With that, Elijah was on the court, running drills with some of the older players. They were faster, stronger, and more experienced, but Elijah kept up, doing his best to stay with them. Every pass, every dribble, every shot mattered. He worked harder than he ever had before, pushing himself to keep pace with the varsity players. He didn't care about the outcome of that practice, he cared about getting better. And he was determined to do just that. By the time practice ended, Elijah was exhausted, his legs sore and his lungs burning. But there was something different about the exhaustion he felt. This wasn't the kind of tired he was used to, the kind that made him want to quit. This was the kind of tired that came from doing something he loved. This was the kind of tired that meant progress. As he left the gym, Coach Harlan stopped him. "Elijah, you've got heart. Keep working like that, and we'll see you on the court more often. You've got potential." Those words meant more to Elijah than anything he had heard in a long time. It wasn't just about being told he had talent, it was about being recognized for his effort. It was about someone seeing him for what he could become, not just what he was. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Elijah began to devote himself entirely to improving his basketball game, while continuing to develop his art. His drawings of Jordans became more detailed, more dynamic. It wasn't just about replicating the shoes he admired anymore, it was about creating something of his own. He started drawing sneakers that combined his creativity with the legacy of the Jordans he loved, adding new elements and designs that reflected his own personal style. He even started a small portfolio, planning to showcase his designs to some local shoe companies. Elijah knew that this was a long shot, but he wasn't going to let the fear of rejection hold him back. Michael Jordan had given him the courage to take a risk, to believe in himself, and now he was ready to act on it. At school, Elijah's reputation grew. Not only was he a kid who had met Michael Jordan, but he was also the one who could make magic with a pencil and paper. His classmates started to appreciate him for his talents, not just for the shoes he wore. The kids who had once mocked him now admired his persistence, his passion, and his drive. It wasn't just about the Jordans anymore. The shoes had been the catalyst, the moment that had sparked everything. But it was Elijah's effort, his ability to keep going when no one was looking, that was taking him places. One day, Mrs. Thompson, the teacher who had always encouraged him to pursue his art, asked him to stay after class. When the last bell rang, Elijah made his way to her desk, curious about what she wanted. "Elijah, I've been talking to a few people about your artwork," she began, her eyes sparkling. "I know you've been working hard on those sneaker designs, and I wanted to let you know that there's a local exhibition coming up. I think it could be a great opportunity for you." Elijah's heart raced. An exhibition? His mind began to spin with possibilities. "You think I could get in?" he asked, almost breathless. "I do," she said, her voice warm with encouragement. "You've got something special, Elijah. Now it's time to share it with the world. The realization hit him like a wave. This was the moment. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He had already been given so much, Michael Jordan's encouragement, his new confidence, but now he had the chance to show the world what he could do. Elijah wasn't just a kid with a dream. He was a kid with a purpose, and he was ready to take the next step. As he walked home that day, his Jordans feeling more like a symbol of his journey than ever before, Elijah knew that his story wasn't just about the shoes. It was about everything that had led him here, the hard work, the belief, and the courage to keep going when the odds were stacked against him. And as he stared down at the sneakers on his feet, Elijah realized that he was just getting started. The days leading up to the exhibition felt like a blur of excitement and nerves for Elijah. His sketches of sneakers had evolved, now more polished and creative than ever. He had spent hours after school perfecting the designs, hoping that this would be the moment that truly defined him as an artist. His classroom, once a place where he kept to himself, had become a space of inspiration, with classmates occasionally peeking over his shoulder to see what he was working on. Every now and then, Elijah would glance at his Jordans, the pair Michael Jordan had given him. They weren't just shoes anymore. They represented something bigger, a belief that, despite where you came from, you could achieve something remarkable if you kept working for it. He had learned that through Michael's actions and words. But Elijah also knew that it wasn't just about the shoes, it was about the work, the persistence, and the willingness to push past fear and doubt. The school had been buzzing for weeks in preparation for the local exhibition. Elijah had been selected to showcase his designs, and while it felt like a huge honor, the pressure was starting to mount. This was no longer just about drawing for fun or getting recognition from his friends. This was a public space, an opportunity to display his work for real designers, local artists, and even potential buyers. He couldn't let this moment slip away. The morning of the exhibition, Elijah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his shirt and staring at the shoes on his feet. They were a constant reminder of how far he'd come, from drawing Jordans on his worn sneakers to now wearing them as symbols of his hard work and dreams. He felt nervous but also a sense of purpose he had never known before. This was a turning point, one way or another. At school, everyone could tell Elijah was different. His classmates treated him with a newfound respect. There were no more whispers or teasing. They looked at him differently now, almost as if they saw him in a new light. Even the teachers seemed to recognize something had shifted in Elijah. His confidence was undeniable, and his presence was more noticeable. His art had become the talk of the school, and people were genuinely interested in what he had to offer. By the time the exhibition began that afternoon, Elijah found himself in the middle of a crowd, explaining his designs to anyone who would listen. The room was filled with local artists, families, and some members of the media. It was overwhelming at first, but Elijah felt a sense of calm when he started talking about his work. As he spoke about each design, about the inspiration behind it, his words came naturally. He wasn't just showing off sneakers anymore, he was telling his story, sharing his journey of persistence and self-belief. As the night wore on, Elijah's booth became one of the most popular. People stopped by, admired his designs, and asked him questions about his process. One man, a local sneaker store owner, even asked if Elijah would be willing to create custom designs for his store. Elijah's heart raced at the idea. It was a dream come true, a chance to have his work seen by a wider audience, to be recognized for something he had created. But amidst all the excitement, Elijah couldn't help but think about Michael Jordan. He had come so far from the kid who couldn't even afford a pair of Jordans to the young artist now standing in front of his own creations, being celebrated for his work. Michael had given him the confidence to keep going when it felt like nobody was watching. Now, Elijah was standing in the spotlight, and it felt surreal. It was almost as if Michael was there in spirit, watching over him, cheering him on. Later that evening, after the crowd had thinned and the event was winding down, Elijah's mom arrived to pick him up. She had been at work all day and had only been able to attend for a short while, but Elijah was grateful for her support. She smiled as she walked up to him, her face full of pride. "You did great, Elijah. I'm so proud of you." Elijah smiled, a little overwhelmed by the praise. I didn't expect it to go like this, Mom. People actually like my designs. I didn't think this would happen. You've always had the talent, baby. You just had to believe in yourself, she said, giving him a hug. Elijah hugged her back, feeling the weight of everything they had been through together. This moment was as much hers as it was his. She had supported him, believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. She had worked hard to give him opportunities, and now it felt like Elijah was finally starting to give something back. As they walked out of the exhibition hall, Elijah's thoughts drifted back to the last few months, how much had changed since that day when Michael Jordan had come to his school. It was hard to believe that all of this had started with a simple drawing on a pair of shoes. The Jordans had represented something he could never afford, but now they symbolized the journey he had taken, the person he was becoming. It wasn't just about the shoes. It was about the work behind them, the belief in himself, and the understanding that he could create something out of nothing if he just kept going. When Elijah got home that night, his mom sat down with him and talked about his future. She asked him what he wanted to do next, now that the exhibition was over and the possibility of working with a local store had opened up. Elijah's mind raced with possibilities. He had never really considered making a career out of his designs, but now, with the encouragement he had received and the recognition of his work, it felt like an opportunity he couldn't pass up. I think I want to keep drawing, Mom, he said, his voice steady. But I don't just want to draw for myself anymore. I want to make something that helps other kids like me, kids who think their dreams are too big or too far out of reach. His mom smiled, her eyes full of pride. I've always known you were meant for something special, Elijah. Keep going. Keep dreaming. The world needs more people like you. Elijah looked down at the Jordans on his feet once more. They weren't just shoes anymore. They were a reminder of his dreams, his growth, and the potential he had inside him. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but he wasn't afraid of the challenge. He had already come so far, and he knew the journey was just beginning. The next morning, after a restless night of excitement and planning, Elijah returned to school with a new energy. He didn't walk in as the quiet kid who had always been on the outside. He walked in as someone who had made a difference, someone who had used his passion to create something real. And as he stepped into the classroom, his eyes caught the sight of his classmates, all of them glancing at him with curiosity and respect. Elijah knew he had earned this moment, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next. His designs weren't just about sneakers anymore. They were about hope, about overcoming obstacles, and about showing others that they could make something of themselves, no matter where they came from. Elijah knew that Michael Jordan had given him a gift, a belief that, no matter the odds, anything was possible if you were willing to put in the work. And now, it was up to him to keep that belief alive, not just for himself, but for others who were still waiting for their moment to shine. The future seemed wide open, and Elijah was ready to take the next step. Whatever came next, he knew he had the tools to make his dreams a reality. The weeks that followed the exhibition were a whirlwind for Elijah. His designs had gained some attention, particularly from local sneaker stores and aspiring young designers. People who had once never given him the time of day now sought him out, asking to collaborate or wanting to buy his artwork. It felt like his dreams, once distant and uncertain, were now within reach. Yet, despite the recognition, Elijah didn't let it go to his head. He knew that this was just the beginning, and if he was going to make something of this opportunity, he would have to keep working hard. At school, Elijah was a different person. His peers no longer saw him as the quiet, awkward kid in the back of the class. They looked at him with new eyes, acknowledging his talent and the drive that had brought him this far. The teasing had stopped, and in its place, there was respect. His classmates began asking him to help with their own projects, drawing inspiration from his determination and creativity. For the first time, Elijah felt like he truly belonged. But his journey wasn't just about success at school or the recognition he was receiving. Elijah wanted to create something bigger than himself, something that could impact others the way Michael Jordan had impacted him. Every day, he worked on his sketches, constantly refining his designs, and learning new techniques to make his artwork stand out. He didn't just want to draw shoes, he wanted to create something that would inspire kids like him, kids who felt like they didn't have a chance. One afternoon, Elijah was walking home from school when he saw a group of younger kids gathered outside the local park, shooting hoops. He had passed this park countless times, but today, something made him stop. It wasn't the kids or the basketball that caught his attention, it was the way they were dressed, shoes worn down to the soles, torn-up jerseys, and mismatched socks. Elijah had been in their shoes before, literally. He had been that kid with the hand-me-down sneakers, dreaming of something better. He couldn't help but watch them, feeling a deep sense of connection. They were playing for fun, but there was something else in their eyes, a hunger for something greater. He watched for a few more moments, then made his way over to the court. The kids barely noticed him at first, too focused on their game. But when Elijah spoke up, they stopped and turned to look at him. "You guys play basketball?" Elijah asked, his voice steady but curious. "Yeah, of course," one of the kids answered. "What about you?" Elijah nodded. "I used to play a lot. I still do, but I guess I've been busy with other things." "Other things?" the kid asked, his eyes narrowing a little. "Yeah, like art," Elijah explained. "I've been drawing a lot, making my own designs." The kid seemed intrigued. "Really? Like shoes?" another one asked. Elijah smiled, his confidence growing. "Yeah, like shoes. Actually, I've been drawing some custom Jordans. I've even had some people ask me to design for them." The kid's eyes widened, their expressions a mix of disbelief and admiration. Elijah realized then that his story had the power to inspire them, just as Michael Jordan's had inspired him. These kids didn't have the same opportunities he did, but maybe, just maybe, he could give them a little spark, something to show them that no matter where they came from, they could achieve something special. As they chatted more, Elijah's mind began to race with ideas. He saw the way they looked at him, the way they hung on every word. For the first time, Elijah realized that he wasn't just a kid who had met Michael Jordan. He was now in a position to give back to others, to create something meaningful for those who hadn't had the same opportunities he had. He wasn't just a dreamer anymore, he was a creator, and his work could change the world, even in small ways. That evening, as Elijah sat at his desk, sketching designs for a new pair of sneakers, he thought about what he had learned over the past few months. Meeting Michael Jordan had been the catalyst, the spark that had ignited his passion for design and made him believe in himself. But it wasn't just about the shoes or the fame, it was about the work. It was about perseverance, about putting in the hours, and about never giving up, no matter how many obstacles stood in the way. But Elijah also knew that the real value of this journey wasn't just in the recognition or the success. It was in what he could give back to others. He had been given an incredible opportunity, and now it was his turn to pass it on, to help those who needed it the most. The next day, Elijah went back to the park. This time, he brought a few of his sketches with him. He showed the kids his designs, explaining how he had created them and the story behind each one. The kids listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. Elijah saw their excitement, and it fueled his desire to keep going. He wanted to inspire them the way he had been inspired. And maybe, just maybe, he could help them believe in their own dreams. As the weeks passed, Elijah continued to work on his designs, but he also began to dedicate time to teaching the younger kids how to draw. He showed them how to create their own sneaker designs, how to experiment with colors, and how to express themselves through art. It wasn't just about creating shoes anymore, it was about creating opportunities for them to discover their own talents, their own passions, and their own dreams. Elijah's art started to gain more attention in the community. People from all over began to recognize him as more than just the kid who drew Jordans. He was a young artist with a purpose, someone who used his talent to inspire others. The local sneaker store that had first expressed interest in his designs reached out to him again, asking if he wanted to showcase his work at a larger event, a local art show with artists from all over the city. Elijah was hesitant at first, the pressure of a bigger event was intimidating. But he knew that this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. He had started this journey because of a dream, and now he had the chance to turn that dream into something even bigger. The night of the art show, Elijah stood in front of his designs, surrounded by people who admired his work. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. For the first time in his life, Elijah felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He wasn't just the kid who had met Michael Jordan or the kid with the Jordans on his feet. He was an artist, an inspiration, and someone who had made a real impact on the people around him. As the show went on, Elijah's phone buzzed. He pulled it out of his pocket and saw a message that made his heart skip a beat. "Elijah, this is Michael Jordan. I saw what you're doing, and I'm proud of you. Keep pushing." Elijah stared at the message for a long moment, his fingers shaking as he typed back a simple thank you. Michael Jordan, the man who had started it all, had just acknowledged his efforts once again. It was a reminder of how far he had come and how much further he could go. As the art show came to an end, Elijah realized that he wasn't just chasing a dream anymore, he was living it. And the best part was, he knew his journey was just beginning. He had created something for himself, but he had also created something for others. He had found his purpose, and it was bigger than sneakers or art. It was about inspiring others, giving back, and showing them that dreams, no matter how big, could come true if you had the heart and the drive to make them happen. That night, Elijah went home with a sense of pride that he had never felt before. He wasn't just wearing Jordans anymore. He was walking in his own shoes, ready for whatever the future held. And as he lay down to sleep, he knew that tomorrow, and every day after, he would keep pushing, keep believing, and keep creating. Because now, he understood something Michael Jordan had taught him: greatness wasn't just about what you achieved, it was about what you did with the opportunity to inspire others along the way. Elijah woke up the next morning with a new sense of purpose. The art show had been a success, but it felt like a small chapter in a much larger story. He had been given a platform to showcase his work, but now, it was time to think bigger. As he lay in bed, reflecting on the excitement of the previous night, he realized that his journey wasn't just about art, it was about making a difference in his community. It was about using his success to give back and inspire others, just as Michael Jordan had inspired him. The next few days were filled with constant communication. Local businesses had reached out to him, and he received messages from people across the country who had seen his art. It was overwhelming, but Elijah wasn't intimidated. He had learned early on that the key to success wasn't just talent, it was the ability to seize opportunities, to step outside your comfort zone, and to keep pushing forward. This was his moment, and he was ready for it. At school, things had changed. His classmates no longer saw him as the kid who barely spoke up or sat quietly in the back. Elijah was now someone they looked up to. They admired his creativity and his work ethic, but more than that, they respected him for the way he had handled everything that had come his way. He wasn't just drawing sneakers anymore, he was creating a legacy, something that could inspire others to do the same. One afternoon, as Elijah was sketching a new design during lunch, Marcus walked over with a grin on his face. "Man, I can't believe how far you've come. I still remember when you were just drawing Jordans in class. Now look at you." Elijah laughed, shaking his head. "It still feels surreal. I never thought this would happen." "You deserve it, Elijah. You've worked harder than anyone I know," Marcus said. "But now, you've got to take it to the next level. You've got the talent. People are starting to notice. What's next for you?" Elijah paused, looking at his drawing. "I think it's time to stop just dreaming. It's time to act. I want to teach others. I want to help kids like me, kids who don't have the resources but have the drive. I want them to know that they can do what I've done, even if they're not given the same opportunities." Marcus nodded, his eyes lighting up. "That's what you should do, Elijah. You've got the platform now. You've got to show others how to make their dreams a reality." The conversation sparked something in Elijah, a fire that had been quietly burning inside him. He had always been focused on his own journey, but now, he realized that his purpose wasn't just to succeed for himself. He had the power to create a ripple effect, to influence others to chase their own dreams, just as Michael had done for him. Elijah was no longer just an artist or a basketball fan. He was a mentor, a guide for others who needed the same belief that had been instilled in him. Over the next few weeks, Elijah began reaching out to local schools and community centers, offering to teach art classes and share his experience. He didn't want to be just another successful artist who kept to himself. He wanted to create a movement, a community of young people who would support each other, push each other, and grow together. He knew that not every kid had the luxury of expensive materials or a mentor like Michael Jordan, but they all had something in common: the potential to create. It wasn't easy at first. Some schools were hesitant to let a kid with no formal teaching experience come in and lead a class. But Elijah wasn't discouraged. He kept reaching out, sharing his story, and slowly but surely, doors began to open. He started small, leading a few workshops at local after-school programs. The kids were drawn to him, eager to learn from someone who had once been just like them, a kid with a dream who refused to let anything hold him back. As Elijah began to teach, he started to see the impact he was having. The kids who sat in his workshops had that same fire in their eyes, that same hunger for something bigger. They were drawn to his energy, his passion, and the belief he had in their abilities. It wasn't just about drawing sneakers anymore, it was about believing that their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, were worth pursuing. One afternoon, as he was teaching a group of middle school students how to sketch their own sneaker designs, one of the kids raised their hand. "Elijah," the kid asked, "how did you get Michael Jordan to notice you? I mean, that's huge." Elijah paused for a moment, thinking back to the day when Michael had visited his school. It still felt like a dream. "You know," he began, "it wasn't just about the shoes or the fact that I drew them. It was about never giving up. It was about having the courage to do something even when no one else believed in me." Michael saw that. He saw the drive, and that's what made the difference. It's not about waiting for someone to hand you something, it's about showing up, doing the work, and believing that anything is possible. The kids in the room were silent, absorbing his words. Elijah saw the spark in their eyes, the same spark he had seen in himself when he was younger, when he had first picked up a pencil and started drawing his own dreams. It was moments like this that reminded him why he was doing what he was doing. His journey wasn't just about creating art or designing shoes, it was about creating something meaningful, something that would inspire others to believe in themselves. As Elijah continued to lead workshops and mentor younger kids, the ripple effect of his work began to grow. More and more students from different neighborhoods started attending his classes, eager to learn, to create, and to believe in their own potential. Elijah wasn't just teaching them how to draw or design sneakers, he was teaching them how to push past obstacles, how to chase their dreams, and how to never stop believing in themselves. Through it all, Elijah remained humble. He didn't see himself as a hero or a role model, he saw himself as a guide, someone who could show others that the path to success wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. The more he taught, the more he realized that his own journey had only just begun. There was still so much to learn, so many more people to inspire, and so many more dreams to help make a reality. One afternoon, as Elijah was wrapping up a class, he received a call from an unexpected source. It was Michael Jordan's team. They wanted to meet with him about a possible collaboration. Elijah's heart skipped a beat. He had always dreamed of working with Michael, but now, it seemed like it might actually happen. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had come this far because he had believed in himself. This was just another step on his journey. As Elijah prepared for the meeting, he reflected on how far he had come, from the kid who had drawn Jordans on his shoes to the young artist who was now inspiring others to dream big. His journey had been anything but easy, but every challenge had led him to this moment. And now, with the possibility of working with Michael Jordan, Elijah knew that his story was far from over. It was just the beginning. He was ready for whatever came next. The meeting with Michael Jordan's team was something Elijah could hardly wrap his mind around. The phone call had come just days before, and since then, he'd been filled with anticipation. He had grown accustomed to the idea that hard work eventually paid off, but this was something beyond anything he had imagined. The chance to meet with Michael's team meant not only recognition but an opportunity to collaborate with a figure who had shaped his own journey in ways words couldn't fully express. Elijah had been a kid dreaming of sneakers, and now he was stepping into a world he had once only observed from a distance. The meeting took place in a downtown office, sleek and modern. When Elijah arrived, he felt an odd mix of nervousness and excitement. He had spent so much time imagining this moment, yet nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. His palms were sweaty as he walked into the meeting room, but he quickly steadied himself. This was it. This was his chance. The room was filled with people from Michael Jordan's team, including some from Nike and others involved in design collaborations. They were friendly, welcoming, and eager to hear from Elijah. As the conversation started, one of the representatives asked, "So, Elijah, tell us a bit more about what you've been doing lately. We've seen your work, and we're impressed by your creativity." Elijah smiled, his confidence growing with each passing second. "I've been working on sneaker designs and art that combines my love for basketball with my passion for creativity. But it's not just about making shoes or artwork, it's about sharing a message with others, especially kids who don't have the same opportunities. I've been teaching art classes and trying to inspire other kids to pursue their dreams, just like I did." There was a moment of quiet as the team exchanged glances, and then one of the designers, a woman named Sarah, spoke up. "That's exactly the kind of message we want to promote. We're looking for artists who not only have talent but who understand the power of influence and the impact of mentorship. You've already shown that you know how to inspire others." Elijah could feel the weight of their words. This was it, the opportunity to do something bigger than just designing shoes. It was about creating a platform for others, about building something that could extend beyond the design world and touch lives. Michael Jordan had inspired him, now he was in a position to inspire others. As the meeting progressed, the conversation shifted from Elijah's past work to potential future collaborations. "What we're thinking," Sarah explained, "is a project that blends art, mentorship, and sneaker culture. We'd love to see how you could work with us to create a limited edition collection that tells a story, something that highlights your journey but also gives back to communities that could use that kind of inspiration." Elijah's mind raced. A limited edition collection? This wasn't just about putting his designs on shoes, it was about telling his story in a way that others could relate to. It was an opportunity to elevate his work to a level he had never dreamed of, but more importantly, it was a chance to give back. The message of overcoming adversity and never giving up, something that had driven his own life, could now be amplified. "Would you be interested in something like that?" one of the team members asked, clearly eager to hear his thoughts. Elijah took a moment to compose himself. The weight of the question hit him hard. He had always wanted to make a difference, but now, this was real. This was a chance to not just draw shoes or sell designs, but to create something lasting, something that could change lives. "I would love to do that," Elijah finally said. "This is more than just making a sneaker. It's about giving kids like me the chance to see themselves in something bigger. I've always believed that anyone can achieve something if they have the right tools and the right mindset. I want to share that belief through my designs." The room seemed to light up at Elijah's words. The team was impressed by his vision and the clarity with which he articulated it. They had seen talent, but it was his perspective on the importance of influence that stood out. Michael Jordan had always been known not just for his skill on the court, but for the way he used his platform to inspire others. Elijah, in his own way, was following that path. The conversation continued for another hour as they discussed potential ideas, logistics, and ways to collaborate. Elijah's excitement grew with every passing minute. He could hardly believe this was happening. He wasn't just a kid drawing Jordans anymore. He was an artist, a designer, and now, a part of a larger movement that could impact the next generation of creators. As the meeting came to an end, Sarah extended her hand to Elijah. "We're thrilled to be working with you, Elijah. We're excited to see where this collaboration can take us." Elijah shook her hand firmly, a smile spreading across his face. "Thank you. This means everything to me." When he left the meeting, Elijah was filled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. His mind raced with ideas, and his heart swelled with pride. He had been given an opportunity few people ever had, and now it was up to him to make the most of it. He wasn't just designing sneakers, he was creating a legacy. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, sketches, and creative brainstorming sessions. Elijah was given access to resources he had only dreamed of, from top-tier designers to professional photographers. But even as he worked with the team, he never lost sight of his original goal, to inspire others, to show them that they too could turn their dreams into reality. He worked tirelessly, pouring his heart and soul into every design. He drew inspiration from his past, from the struggles he had faced growing up and the resilience that had carried him through. Each shoe, each design, told a story. They were more than just sneakers, they were a reflection of his journey, of the belief that anything was possible. As the release date for the limited edition collection approached, Elijah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This wasn't just a project, it was a representation of everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of. But it was also something bigger than himself. It was a message, a call to action for kids who were still dreaming, still hoping that one day their moment would come. The day of the launch finally arrived, and Elijah stood in front of a crowd of fans, designers, and influencers, ready to unveil the collection he had worked so hard on. He could feel the weight of the moment, but it wasn't the pressure that he felt. It was the anticipation of finally sharing his story with the world. This wasn't just a pair of shoes, it was a testament to everything he had overcome, everything he had learned, and everything he had yet to achieve. When the shoes were revealed, Elijah watched as people reacted with awe. They weren't just admiring the design, they were seeing the story behind it. They saw the kid who had once drawn Jordans on worn-out sneakers now standing before them as a designer, an artist, someone who had used his passion to create something that mattered. As the event wound down, Elijah stood backstage, looking at the shoes on display. A sense of fulfillment washed over him. This wasn't just about a sneaker collection, it was about the message, about what he had created, and about the people he had inspired along the way. The journey had been long, but Elijah knew it was only the beginning. There was so much more to come. He thought back to the day Michael Jordan had walked into his school, handing him those Jordans and telling him to keep believing. Now, Elijah was doing the same for others. He was showing them that no matter where they came from, no matter what obstacles they faced, they could create something special too. Elijah smiled to himself, knowing that the legacy he was building was just as much about the work he did as it was about the people he inspired along the way. Months passed since Elijah's first collaboration with Michael Jordan's team. What started as a dream had transformed into a reality beyond his wildest expectations. His designs had not only sold out, but they had caught the attention of the larger sneaker and fashion industries. Elijah had become a symbol for perseverance, and his story was now an inspiration for others, especially for kids like him, who didn't have much but believed that anything was possible with the right amount of work and determination. As the demand for his work grew, so did the pressure. Elijah was constantly working on new designs, running workshops, and mentoring the younger generation. The excitement of the first collection was still fresh, but now, he was faced with the challenge of living up to his success and finding new ways to give back to the community. It wasn't just about his art anymore, it was about building something that could last, something that would continue to inspire even after the shoes were sold and the exhibits had ended. Elijah had always known that his journey wasn't just about drawing shoes, it was about creating a platform for others to succeed. He wanted to build a movement, one that brought together young people from all walks of life, united by the belief that they, too, could achieve greatness. His work had started in the classroom, but now, it was expanding beyond those walls. His workshops were becoming more and more popular. Local schools and community centers were asking him to come and speak, to share his story and show kids how they could turn their own passions into something real. Elijah had become a role model, but he never let it go to his head. He didn't want to be seen as just a figure to admire, he wanted to be someone who could help others find their own voice, their own path. One afternoon, while preparing for an upcoming presentation at a youth mentorship conference, Elijah got a call that would change everything. It was from Michael Jordan's team again, but this time, it was a different kind of call. "Hey Elijah, how's everything going?" the voice on the other end of the line asked. "I'm good, Just getting ready for the mentorship conference. It's been crazy, but I'm excited to share my story with more people, Elijah replied, trying to hide the hint of nervousness in his voice. That's great to hear. Actually, we've been following your progress and wanted to talk to you about something big. Michael's been really impressed with what you've done so far, both the work with the shoes and the impact you've made in the community. He'd like to meet with you again to discuss a new collaboration, something that could help push your mission even further. Elijah's heart skipped a beat. Wait, Michael wants to meet with me again? Yeah, the voice said. We're thinking about creating a long-term initiative that focuses not just on the art, but on mentoring young people, providing scholarships for aspiring designers, and creating opportunities in communities that need it the most. Michael believes you're the perfect person to lead this. We want to partner with you on this project. Elijah couldn't believe what he was hearing. What started as a moment of recognition, meeting Michael Jordan and receiving a pair of shoes, had grown into something far more impactful. This was an opportunity not just to create more designs, but to create a legacy of mentorship and empowerment. After the call, Elijah sat quietly for a while, processing everything that had just been said. He thought back to his own upbringing, to the struggles his family had faced, to the hours he spent drawing shoes with no guarantee that anything would come of it. And now, Michael Jordan's team was offering him a chance to build something bigger than he had ever imagined. This wasn't just about sneakers or art anymore, it was about shaping the future for the next generation. The meeting with Michael Jordan took place in a private office in Chicago. Elijah arrived early, his mind racing with anticipation. When Michael walked into the room, it was impossible to ignore the impact he had on the space. He wasn't just a legend, he was the man who had inspired Elijah to keep going when everything seemed uncertain. Elijah, Michael said, his voice warm but purposeful. It's good to see you again. I've been following everything you've been doing, and I'm impressed. You've turned your passion into something real, and you've made an impact. That's something I've always believed in, using your platform to help others. So when we talked about this initiative, I knew you were the right person to help lead it. Elijah stood up, his heart pounding. I don't know what to say, Michael. This is incredible. I never imagined anything like this happening when I first started drawing shoes. I just wanted to inspire people, to show them that dreams can come true, no matter where they come from. Michael smiled. And you're doing just that. You've shown that it's not about where you start, but about how hard you're willing to work to get where you want to go. Now, we want to take it to the next level. We want to create an initiative that gives kids the resources, the mentorship, and the opportunities to make their own dreams a reality, just like you did. The conversation turned to specifics. The initiative would involve scholarships for young designers, mentorship programs, and partnerships with schools and community centers to provide resources for kids who might not otherwise have access to them. Michael Jordan's name would be attached to the project, but the focus was on the kids, on giving them the same opportunities Elijah had received. Elijah's role in the project would be to lead the creative aspect of the initiative. He would be the face of the mentorship program, working directly with young people to help them develop their artistic skills and guiding them toward careers in design. It was everything Elijah had ever wanted, but it also came with a huge responsibility. He would no longer be just a kid with a dream, he would be the one inspiring others to follow in his footsteps. As the meeting wrapped up, Michael gave Elijah one last piece of advice. The work is just beginning. But I've seen what you're capable of, and I know you're ready. Just remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent, being real with people, and showing them that they can do it too. Elijah left the meeting feeling a sense of clarity and purpose that he hadn't felt before. He was no longer just a designer, an artist, or a kid who had met Michael Jordan. He was a leader, a mentor, and someone who had the chance to change the course of others' lives. The weight of it all was a lot to carry, but Elijah didn't shy away from it. He had spent his whole life working toward this moment, and now that it was here, he was ready. The next few months were a blur of activity. Elijah worked closely with Michael's team to bring the initiative to life. They partnered with local schools, set up scholarship programs, and launched a social media campaign to spread the word. The response was overwhelming. Kids from all over the country began applying for the scholarships, eager to learn and create. Elijah's workshops were filled to capacity, and he found himself working long hours, traveling to different cities, and meeting with kids who were hungry for inspiration and guidance. As the program grew, Elijah saw firsthand the impact he was having. He saw kids who had once felt overlooked and underrepresented now believing in their own potential. He saw them create art, design shoes, and build their own paths in ways they never thought possible. And every time he looked back at the work he had done, Elijah felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the ability to give back and show others what was possible. Through it all, Elijah stayed grounded. He never forgot where he came from, and he always made time for the kids who needed him the most. He knew that his story was far from over, that the legacy he was building was just beginning. But for the first time in his life, Elijah didn't feel like he was chasing something. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. As the initiative continued to grow, Elijah realized that this was what it had always been about. It wasn't about the shoes, the fame, or even the designs. It was about making a difference, about showing others that they, too, could rise above their circumstances and chase their dreams. Michael Jordan had once given him a pair of shoes, and now Elijah was giving something much greater, the belief that anything was possible. And in that, he found his true legacy. The years following the launch of the Mentorship Initiative felt like a continuous evolution for Elijah. What started as a simple passion for design had grown into something much larger than he could have ever imagined. His life had changed in ways he could not have foreseen, but at the core, it was still rooted in the same belief that had driven him all those years ago: dreams were worth pursuing, no matter where you started. The program had flourished. The scholarships, the mentorship programs, the workshops, it all grew into a nationwide movement. Elijah's name had become synonymous with perseverance, creativity, and a willingness to give back. Young artists, designers, and basketball fans from across the country were sending him messages, telling him how his story had inspired them to follow their own paths, whether in art, basketball, or other creative pursuits. Every message, every note of gratitude reminded Elijah of why he had started this journey: to show kids that they could be more than their circumstances, to help them realize their potential. But even as he looked around at the success of the initiative, Elijah felt something deeper stirring within him. He had built something incredible, but it wasn't the program's growth that mattered most to him anymore. It was the individual moments, the quiet conversations with young artists, the way their eyes lit up when they saw their own potential. It was the sense of fulfillment that came from knowing he was part of something that was changing lives. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings and workshops, Elijah sat down to reflect. He pulled out the old sketches, the ones he had drawn so many years ago, sitting in his room with nothing but a dream. As he looked at the designs, a sense of nostalgia washed over him. Those drawings had been his escape, his way of reaching for something greater, something beyond the limitations of his surroundings. But now, those designs were part of a much bigger picture. They had sparked not just his career, but a movement that was helping others turn their dreams into reality. As he reflected, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his old friend Marcus, who had stayed by his side throughout everything. "Hey man, remember those days when we were just talking about the possibilities? Look at what you've built. You're changing the game for real." Elijah smiled at the message. Marcus had always been his biggest supporter, the one who never let him doubt his abilities. But even now, Elijah couldn't help but feel like he was only getting started. There was still so much more to do, so much more he wanted to offer to the next generation of creators. The following week, Elijah was invited to speak at a major conference for young entrepreneurs and artists. It was a prestigious event, and the invitation alone felt like an acknowledgement of everything he had accomplished. But more than that, it was another opportunity to reach a larger audience, to inspire those who were still sitting on the sidelines, unsure of whether they could make a difference. When he took the stage, Elijah felt the weight of the moment. The room was filled with aspiring artists, designers, and creatives, people who were just like him, unsure of where to start but hungry for success. He paused, looking out at the crowd, and for a moment, it was as if he was back in his own shoes, drawing Jordans on paper, dreaming of a future that seemed far beyond his grasp. "First, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was sitting in your seats," Elijah began, his voice steady and clear. "When I started this journey, I didn't have much. I didn't have the best shoes, the best equipment, or the best opportunities. But what I had was belief. I believed that if I kept going, if I kept pushing, I could make something happen. And that's what you need to hold on to. It's not about where you start, it's about what you do with what you have." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his every word. Elijah knew that this was more than just a speech, it was a chance to pass on the message that had carried him this far. He could see the faces of the young people in the crowd, the same look of uncertainty he had once had. They were waiting for a sign, a spark of hope to light the way forward. And Elijah knew that if he could do it, they could too. "We all have a choice," he continued, "to keep pushing, to keep believing in something bigger than ourselves. It's not about getting everything perfect, it's about showing up every day, doing the work, and being open to what comes next. You're all capable of amazing things, but you have to believe that first." The applause was deafening when Elijah finished speaking. He stood there for a moment, soaking it all in. This was the moment that solidified everything he had worked for. He wasn't just speaking to a room of young people, he was speaking to the dreamer inside of all of them, reminding them that anything was possible if they didn't give up. As the conference ended and people came up to him with questions and gratitude, Elijah realized that his work wasn't just about inspiring individuals, it was about creating a community, a network of people who supported one another and believed in each other's potential. He had built something that was bigger than himself, something that would continue to grow long after he was gone. That night, Elijah sat in his hotel room, looking at the messages and feedback he had received. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from his mom. "I'm so proud of you, Elijah. You've come so far, and I know this is just the beginning. Keep pushing. You're making a difference." Elijah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. His mom had always been there for him, from the early days when she'd worked tirelessly to support him, to now, when she saw the person he had become. The journey had been hard, but every step had been worth it. As he put his phone down, Elijah looked out the window at the city lights below. He thought about his past, the kid who had drawn Jordans on his shoes, who had dreamed of something bigger. He thought about Michael Jordan, the man who had first shown him that anything was possible if you were willing to work for it. And he thought about the kids who were just starting their own journeys, just beginning to believe that their dreams could come true. For the first time, Elijah felt a deep sense of peace. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He had built something meaningful, something that would continue to inspire others for years to come. His work, his legacy, was no longer about the shoes or the designs. It was about the lives he had touched, the stories he had shared, and the hope he had instilled in others. The world was full of possibilities, and Elijah knew that his journey wasn't over. He had set out to make a difference, and now, he was part of a movement that was bigger than any single person or project. He had achieved something far greater than he had ever imagined. As he sat there, looking out at the world before him, Elijah realized that he had already won. Not because of the accolades or the recognition, but because he had found his purpose. And with that purpose, he would continue to inspire, create, and believe. For himself, for others, and for the next generation. The journey was just beginning, and Elijah was ready for whatever came next.